As members of the Global Farmer Network,
we believe agriculture is part of the solution,
not part of the problem.
We are committed to developing agricultural leaders
and sharing their stories across the globe.
We have one purpose:
to amplify the farmer's voice.
My voice.
Mi voz.
La mia voce.
My voice.
Welcome to Global Farmer Voices, a podcast by the Global Farmer Network, where we invite farmers from around the world to share their stories and perspectives. I'm Delaney Howell, host for this podcast series. Today, we'll hear from Andrew Osmond, a farmer in the United Kingdom who grows a variety of crops, including malting barley for the production of beer and whiskey. Andrew's early years on his family's farm, as well as his background in agronomy, have given him a unique perspective as a farmer.
I've been in farming all my life and raised on a farm, and we farmed in the UK primarily. So we farmed just outside a city called Winchester, which is in the south of England, and it's a family farm, family business, and on both sides of my wife Sarah, she's farming as well, and I'm farming the other side. So we're all farming together. So the farm is Moorcourt Farm, and it's about, in old money, it's 1,000 acres. In new, it's 400 hectares. And in the UK now, there's a lot of farming, contract farming. So we farm another 400 hectares for a near neighbour, which works out really well. He's a landowner, so we do commercial crops there. So very much family-based farm, but we do some contracting, some contract farming as well. And we also farm in a neighbouring county called Dorset. Winchester's based in Hampshire. Go a bit further southwest, and there's a beautiful county called Dorset, and we've got some land there as well. On the home farm, we are primarily seed growers. So we have specialised, we've tried to add value to what we do by growing for seed and seed crops. So we would grow grass for seed, which is quite a small crop in the UK. I know in Oregon it's the mecca of all grass seeds, and New Zealand as well. But we grow grass for seed, and they're predominantly diploid varieties. So they're forage varieties for hay, haylage, silage, that type of crop. But other farmers do grow sports amenity and things like that. But we find that type of grass seed is good. And then we grow wheat and barley for some of the bigger companies like Cargill, Frontier. They're known as Frontier in this country, but Cargill worldwide, and also Syngenta. We're growing seed that goes on to other farmers to multiply up, that then go on to be multiplied for commercial use. So we've kind of specialised in that. On the other farms, on the contract farms, we try and keep it simple and grow commercial crops that suit our climate and suit our soils. And so they would mainly be around wheat and barley. They would be and malting barley being the big one there, not feed. Wheat would be primarily feed wheat, not milling or bread wheat. And also our main break crop, although it has big problems with weeds and disease and pests in particular, is oilseed rape, which is canola, known as canola worldwide. So, and we're looking to grow more crops, especially protein crops. Protein crops are more leguminous crops, which soil health. It's the big thing in the UK at the moment is soil health and how we promote that with all the biology. And I'm trying to understand more in the soil, and legumes would be a big part of that, in that they potentially produce some, nitrogen fixing if they're grown for long enough.
Andrew's particularly notable crop, as we mentioned, is malting barley, which is used to produce beer and whiskey. The maritime climate and chalky, low-nitrogen soils in Andrew's region of England are well suited to growing malting barley. Many people know that there's a lot of science that goes into making beer and whiskey, but might not realize the scientific legwork that producers are doing as well as a part of this process, like measuring nitrogen levels in the soil and protein levels in the grain. There's a lot to manage before it even begins to be turned into some of our favorite drinks.
But the malting barley situation is very much how much nitrogen or protein is in the grain. And so, depending on the growing season and how you've grown it, will then dictate. It's slightly out of our hands as rain-fed agriculture is. Well, our factory hasn't got a roof, and it's very difficult to really control what's going on. But the different levels of nitrogen in barley is very much dependent on the season you're having and on the amount of nitrogen you apply. And if you then add in leguminous crops, crops that produce nitrogen, you're then in potentially a situation where you don't quite know how much nitrogen is available. And that, so it's something that we want to do. We want to grow more protein crops for the protein and for animal feeds, let alone the soil health. But then with something like malting barley, because it's so sensitive with its protein levels, if you've got a lot of background nitrogen in the soil, you don't know when that's going to be available. You don't know really when that's going to be taken up, and it's quite weather dependent. So the hitting those crucial protein contents is tricky.
Clearly, there are a lot of factors impacting crops and farming that can't be controlled. Andrew is already doing soil and plant testing to monitor protein and nitrogen levels. However, he's certainly looking forward to the ongoing improvements in precision ag to help with this process.
Precision farming is here, isn't it? And it's only, and the amount of data that we're going to collect is just going to go off the charts. I've spoken to Rob Sake about this, who's brilliant and just all over sort of future farming, in quantum computing lands. It's just going to be, I don't understand it, but it's the amount of data that we're going to be able to process is going to become extraordinary, as long as it's good data in, good data out. But so when it comes to testing, yes, we will increase our testing of the soils. We're at quite good levels already, because we do map the fields and we do soil tests quite regularly. So we've got an idea, and our soil type, being chalky, it's not too variable. So that helps massively. But yeah, the more testing you can do of the soil and the more testing of the plants, there's some very good diagnostic equipment available now to test the nitrogen that's actually in the plant as well, the better. And that's going to, because it's so crucial to hit the quality specs. We're being asked by our customers, the brewers and the maltsters, to hit certain bands of protein in the grain. And we're in rain-fed agriculture, and it rains when it wants to, and it might not be at the right time. And if it does rain, and then nitrogen is then suddenly available to the plant, and it takes it all up in a massive rush. We're very much producers, aren't we, as farmers? And I think some farmers don't necessarily like that, and the fact that you lose control of your product, you don't know what you're going to get paid, etc. So if you can actually keep hold of it, that primary malting barley, and then turn it into malt, and then brew your own beer as well, then sell it, which some farmers are doing. It's direct access to market, and it's got a great story. It's just a great story, and you can trace it back, to the farm, to the field. Your beer came from lower, higher, middle paddock or whatever, and it's just a good story, isn't it?
Not only is growing the barley a detailed and precise process, but the proper storage of the harvested grain is just as critical.
You can't harvest it and forget. You have to harvest that crop, and you have to treat it like it's still alive. It sounds a bit weird to say that, but you have to, because it kind of is still alive, because the germination is critical in malting barley. If you the harvest we've had, where you get these really wet, then warm, wet, warm, you can get what's called pre-germ in field. So the grain thinks it's time to grow again. and you've just got to stop that. And you can do that. So germination is critical, and we're talking of very high levels of germination required for malting barley in the UK of 96, 98% germination. So 100 grains, and you think, hang on a minute, I'm buying seed at 85%. How can this be? But that's the sort of technical spec that they're hitting. So the harvesting and storage conditioning of malting barley is so important. You've got to get that down to, ideally for long-term storage, it's got to be 14% moisture. And we've been harvesting grains this harvest at 20% plus. I mean, it's going to sound to some people like, what are you doing harvesting water? But we have to, otherwise the germination will go. The quality, for every day after that grain is fit in the field, you are losing yield, you are losing quality. So you have to get it in. You have to get it down to 14% moisture, and you have to get it down under 10 degrees centigrade if you possibly can, as soon as you can. Very difficult this time of year. But
Winter and spring barley, identified by the time of year the crop is grown, amongst other things, are favored for different types of brews, depending on the variety and the nitrogen and protein levels of the grain. Spring barley is most popular overall. When the barley is ready to be sold, it goes to whiskey distillers and beer companies.
So we're currently growing 3 or 4 varieties. Laureate, Planet was a very popular. That was like RGT Planet was a worldwide spring barley. But we're growing Laureate and Signet and Tennyson, which seem to be very similar barleys to each other. So it's that's what we do on farm. So we grow these crops, and predominantly spring barley, as I said now, because that also hits the lager market. Lager is the more popular global beer, isn't it? The Buds, the Millers, to the Stellars and Stellar and that. So, and they have that higher nitrogen. They've got a specification where they want to be 165 N to 1.8 N. The protein measurements in barley for malting are different, because barley for malt is different. It's just a little market almost all on its own, whereas the measurement for proteins in wheat would be different. So the higher protein nitrogen content spring barleys are for lager, and if you want a traditional ale or craft beer, I mean, the States, massive. Wow, what the States have done with craft beers is just brilliant. They would be the lower nitrogen, so the 1.5 and 1.6 level nitrogen. And the really big success story is a winter malting barley called Maris Otter, which is from the 1950s and 60s, I think. But there's a little niche market for it, and I know malt gets exported to the States because of it, because it's Maris Otter barley. It's that name, and it's that story. It just creates, a wonderful story, and I'm sure the hops that go into it are Fuggles or something like that. They're called. They'll be special, but it just that's a big little niche success story there with Maris Otter. A local merchant in the UK have got the rights to that variety, and so they very much keep that to themselves. And they've got their own maltings as well, which is a traditional floor malt where everything is turned by hand. Nightmare. But anyway, that's all part of the story.
What a fun conversation. It's amazing just how many different types of farmers there are, and how each play such a unique role in our food, fiber, fuel, and in this case, beverage industries. If you're interested in learning more about the Global Farmer Network's mission and its members, seeing some of the things the organization is doing, and finding out how you can get involved, please visit globalfarmernetwork.org. And if you'd like to support the Global Farmer Network through a donation, you can do so at globalfarmernetwork.org/donate. If you've enjoyed today's podcast episode, be sure to subscribe and follow Global Farmer Network on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube. Until next time, I'm Delaney Howell, and this has been the Global Farmer Voices podcast.